Good morning. Okay, not only are we being recorded, but it's on live TV. No, I'm joking. There is a button back there that they can make that happen. So welcome to another version of the pre-wet season construction site inspection training. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we're going to go through today, what you can expect, and then I'll turn it over to Scott Taylor. So Scott Taylor is going to be up first with general erosion and sediment control. Then I'll go through both the requirements for the construction general permit and the MS4 requirements for the Santa Ana region. I'll then go through small sites. A lot of what we heard on comments from different inspectors is that they wanted to focus more of the training on the small sites as well as get perspectives from other inspectors. And so that's why we're bringing in the city inspector perspective with Jay Denny from the city of Irvine. We'll have the county's inspector perspective with perspectives from both Robin Lamont and Hunter Smith. And then again, as Jennifer mentioned, regional board was supposed to be here, but we will hopefully try to get some take-homes from them, and hopefully we'll have their presentation available online for you to review. So with that, I will now turn it over to Scott Taylor.
All right, thanks a lot, Dan. Just got about a half hour here, and then Dan's going to talk to you about small construction sites. I'm going to talk about just the inspection process and erosion and sediment control. Want to start out with what to inspect. Obviously, at a construction site, sediment is the primary pollutant, so that's what we're most focused on. So the areas that have not reached final stabilization yet, the 70% vegetated coverage or some other type of coverage is going to be the primary one. Second to that would be erosion and sediment control. BMPs, you're looking not only are they installed correctly, but do they need any maintenance? And then you're looking for any potential release of soil or other pollutants, and we're looking at some potential situations in some of the pictures that I have later. And other potential pollutants on a construction site include obviously cement materials, oil, a lot of construction equipment leaks, and so you want to make sure that your site is always clean and clear of any oil stains on the ground or drips on impervious surfaces. Certainly trash, it's prohibited under the construction general permit and really in your municipal permit for any trash to leave the construction site at all. So that's why trash containers have to be covered at the end of every day so that if it gets windy at night, they're not discharging their contents. Portable toilets, it's really just all about placement. You want them back off the street so when they come and be cleaned, serviced, washed out, that non-stormwater isn't running down the gutter. And any other non-stormwater is really prohibited from leaving a construction site. There's outside of natural groundwater, there's not much that can be discharged into the storm drain system, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Why are you out there? Well, you're looking to make sure the BMPs are installed correctly, as I said, and also point out if there's any failures or any maintenance needs. In general, from a 50,000 foot perspective, your mission is to ensure that the city is in compliance with the construction element of its MS4 program, and specifically that means the city's erosion and sediment control ordinance, and also the booklet, which Dan will talk a little bit more, that was put together by the Orange County Stormwater Program, which specifically discusses what that entails. So that is your job in a nutshell. You're not there to enforce the construction general permit. That is the purview of the Regional Water Quality Control Board. But if you're not getting cooperation on the site, it is your obligation to notify the regional board and have them come out and be the heavy and be the enforcement. If you've gone through your normal escalation procedures and they haven't been effective, then your obligation is to contact the board and have them come. How to do your inspections: always start at the downstream of the site, and that the reason is very simple. You're just looking for any pollution that has left the site or evidence of pollution that's left the site, whether that be staining, oil, or sediment, of course. Hopefully, everybody has a digital camera either in their phone or just a separate camera, but taking pictures of issues and problems as documentation is absolutely key, worth 1,000 words. You want to inspect the BMPs from downstream to upstream, again, just looking for evidence of breaches or discharge of any pollutants. And then certainly you want to note the evident potential for or any evidence of pollution leaving the site. And got some pictures on that. Some of the key locations that you want to look at, certainly, as I said, all disturbed areas. Disturbed areas before a rain event have to have some sort of erosion control down. You want to make sure that there are site perimeter controls, that all the conveyances like open V-ditches and things like that have perimeter controls around them and or ditch checks in them. If you're lucky enough to have a site that discharges directly to a receiving water, a stream, creek, bay, something like that, then you certainly want to pay extra attention to that interface, that edge between the construction site and the receiving water to make sure nothing is leaving the site and getting into the receiving water. All drain inlets have to have some sort of cover, inlet protection. And also looking at storm drain outfalls and discharge points, you're really looking mostly for trash and any evidence of sediment being discharged at that location, because usually where you have a pipe outfall, you're going to have an expansion. The velocity is going to drop off, so the dirt and trash and things tend to accumulate right at the outlet. So it's a good method for you if there's an outfall nearby to go and just check that out and see if there's anything coming off of your construction site that shouldn't be. Some of the things to look at specifically, stockpiles, those have to be covered if they're not actively being used, and certainly that's for not only erosion but also for wind, dust control. All of your solid waste containers have to be covered, as I said, sanitary facilities set back, all the hazardous materials stored under cover and contain, cargo containers. The fueling areas have to be clean, no spilled fuel, has to be a spill kit there. If you have a waste or borrow site associated with the construction and say it's off-site, it doesn't get a buy just because it's physically detached from the construction site. All of the requirements of the permit and your ordinances apply to the waste and borrow site as well. And then I think everybody's kind of got the concrete washout areas down now. They have to be there. They have to be watertight. And the concrete waste actually has to make it into the washout, not just near it, because we're very concerned about any cement residue that can change the pH of runoff water. So let's talk about the erosion and sediment control BMPs. As I said, all disturbed portion of the site before the rainy season has to have some sort of erosion control. So soil binders is, your first and easiest and cheapest way to go. It's just a clear liquid, usually clear, that can have dye added to it. Things like earth guard fall under this, polyacrylamide, and it's good for about one storm event. Hydraulic mulch is the next product up. It's a binder mixed in with wood fiber. This stuff goes on about 1/4 inch thick, and it'll last a couple of storm events. So if there's not going to be any earthwork done for a few months, this is probably something that would be good, but you'll be looking for adequate coverage of this material, and then going forward making sure that it's not spent and done and you're starting to get erosion. If you've done final, quote, landscaping, but it doesn't reach final stabilization, which is the 70% coverage rule, you may want to be looking at something like landscape mulch. This stuff goes on really thick, and it's the best kind is the fibrous, kind of shredded mulch that's going to stick together as opposed to just be mobilized by runoff and float away. This can get you to that final 70% coverage level. Another option, bonded fiber matrix, a very pricey, expensive product, but also performs very well. It costs $6,000 or so an acre to put down, but this stuff will last several years and will actually help plants germinate. So, you know, there's flexible growth medium is a type of BFM. It retains a lot of water, and so you can get volunteer vegetation up through it over a couple of rainy seasons, but it'll prevent erosion during those rainy seasons. Straw mulch, good standby. If it's put down in the right quantity and has good coverage, it's hard to beat, particularly if you put down a binder first, then straw mulch, and then punch it in, or a binder over the top. But you're getting excellent erosion control. Just keep in mind that it's flammable. A new product that's out there is wood straw, it's called, and you can type in wood straw in Google, and there's a website, the manufacturer of this will come up. We're using this in kind of out backcountry areas, so in urban areas may not have quite as much application, but just because I haven't seen it there yet, it might be something to consider. It's very heavy. It's actually made from waste wood at wood, processing facilities. So they gather this up and they put it into long strands, and it does kind of resemble a straw. Goes down pretty thick. As I said, it's heavy. It doesn't need to be punched or tacked in. So might be something that will gain some traction if you've got large areas that need to be stabilized. I think it's something that could substitute for like bonded fiber matrix, for example. And then if you really want to open your wallet, there's always mats. Just make sure if you're out on a site that the mat is put down on absolutely smooth base. You don't want it track walked. You don't want dirt clods. You don't want any surface undulations or things like that, because it's not going to work if the mat isn't in contact with the soil. So it has to be put down correct on a well-prepared subgrade and then stapled down to make sure that you have contact with the soil. If that's done, it's going to work really well. If it's put down sloppy, it's not going to work at all, and they'll just be rilling underneath the mat, and it'll just be a disaster. So make sure that it's installed correctly. Yeah. Yeah, the track walking is going to create these ridges. It's going to lift the mat up off of it, and it's going to reduce the effectiveness. Yeah, it's just got to be bladed smooth. Absolutely. Hydroseed, if you can, you want to get stuff growing, now is the time to hydroseed. Put down your hydroseed, which is water, fertilizer, seeds, and then put down a week later a shot of mulch over the top to keep everything in place with the binder in it, and then pray for rain. If it doesn't rain, it's probably going to be tough. You'll have to, water it, but right before the rainy season starts is where you want to do your hydroseed. Or any time of year if you've got like a highline irrigation system, but absent that, you want to be doing it in October, November, something like that. So talk a little bit about the erosion controls. Silt fence, just make sure that it's used for shallow sheet flow, unconcentrated flow, that it's put on a contour, and that the fabric's trenched in. You've all seen the abuse of silt fence, right? It's the most abused BMP. It's running down the fall line. It's used to demarcate the property line, creates a preferential flow path. You get erosion along it. None of that stuff is helping the cause. So just make sure that it's used appropriately and installed correctly. If you do have concentrated flow, which is certainly not what silt fence is for, you want to go to a sediment basin. It's the only thing that must be designed by a registered civil engineer. So if a sediment basin is called out in the SWIP, it has to be designed for fact sheet SE2, and it has to be designed by a registered civil engineer. You can grab the fact sheet for free off the State Board's website and also the CASCA website. Got to have basic things like an outlet structure and an engineered spillway. Fiber rolls, real similar in application to silt fence. It needs to have intimate contact with the soil. If you can see light underneath it, it's not going to work because it's for shallow, unconcentrated flow. Water comes up and hits it, stops, and then has to restart down the slope again and gain energy. So you're looking to space these things so that you don't get rilling in between the fiber rolls. If you've got rilling in between the fiber rolls, either it's not in contact with the soil or they're spaced too far apart. The permit has a table in there that requires a minimum spacing, but I go with the visual method. If there isn't rilling, it's good. If there is rilling, it's not. It's pretty simple. So make sure that they're installed correctly and that there's no rilling in between them. If there is, you need to either fix the installation or add another row. Gravel bag berms, very similar. Again, it's a good perimeter control, but the main use of these, I think now, is for check dam type installations. If you've got an undercut street, you can put in gravel bags and they will stay put and pond a little bit more water and take a little bit more abuse. But it's the same principle as the straw wattles. How do you know that you have the bags frequently enough? If there's rilling in between them, you don't. If there isn't, you do. And on steep areas, you're going to need a lot of rows of gravel bags because you're trying to stop the water and then it has to reaccelerate again, and you're going to stop it right when it starts getting to erosive velocity levels. Everything's got to be, all the inlets have to be protected. It's great to have fabric down in the non-rainy season, keeps the dirt and trash out of the storm drain system. Just make sure it's not there when it rains. You want to go with the gravel bags, again, to pond the water around the inlet. You don't want to ever try to filter any water going through an inlet because it's not going to keep up with the volume of water, and you're going to end up with flooding, safety problems, and issues trying to unclog the inlet. Everybody's got to have a construction entrance. The rock is going to do a good job during the dry periods in the dry season. It's not going to work if you have clay soils, which is 90% of the county, and when the clay gets even a little bit wet. In that case, you're going to have to insist on going to a wheel wash. Well, you don't have to tell them means and methods, but you have to insist on a clean street. And the way they're going to get a clean street is by doing either manual or automatic wheel washes when the clay is very wet. So it's just something that you have to insist on that nobody's going to want to do, but it's your street, and that runoff from that street's going to get into your storm drain system, and then there's going to be problems with meeting the standards coming out of the effluent from the municipal system otherwise. Dewatering, just as I mentioned earlier, you need a permit most likely to dewater from a construction site. If you have natural uncontaminated rising groundwater, that can still be discharged. But if you're pumping the groundwater, they better have been talking to the regional board about a permit. If you're pumping stranded stormwater, like say out of a footing excavation or something like that, it's fine, but it better be absolutely clear. Two things: you have to know that it's stranded stormwater. It wasn't there the day before it rained, it's there now, and it needs to be absolutely clear when they discharge it, not cloudy. There's a higher standard for discharges from construction sites when it's not raining, and that is absolutely clear water is that standard. All the material just needs to be covered and contained up under, and there should be no excuses for that. Anything petroleum, paint, gypsum, sacks of concrete, anything like that, contained and not allowed to get any rain on it. Concrete waste has to be a watertight washout, and the concrete waste has to make it all the way into the washout. So I got some slides that we can just talk about together, see what you see on some of these. This one has at least one good thing and a lot of questionable things. What do you think the good thing is on it? It's not raining. That's a good thing. You're right. That's probably the best thing that they got going for this site. I agree. Yeah. I mean, I don't think you'd ever want the gravel out into the street, because if it's knocking dirt off, it's going right in the gutter, which is then going right in your storm drain system. I mean, I like the toilet placement on this one. I think that that's pretty good. It's back off the street when they service it. Yeah, they got They got some silt fence that you can see coming along, but then they lost interest in it, and there's none others. You know, this street is a little dirty. What was that? Yeah, the waste container's not covered, and it's really overflowing. I think that this is some of the stuff coming out of it. And they do have the cargo containers, but it looks like they're stacking stuff on top of it, which kind of misses the point too. So, you know, something like this, it needs help to, and so it's something I'd write a correction notice for, definitely. How about this? Who's okay signing off on this? I mean, you see this a lot on the single-family stuff, I'm sure. The landscape contractors, the pool contractors, you got to insist that this doesn't happen, because the guy upstream, irrigation excess, washing his car, it's going to run right through the pile and pick up a bunch of turbidity, and that'll run, you know, a lot over the time that that's there and just be discharging into the storm drain system. So if you see it, make sure that it's cleaned up, you know, within a day, something like that. Here's what I'm talking about with concrete washouts. It seems like close enough is good enough. It's not, because it's not the, you know, the actual concrete material that's inert. We don't care about it. Obviously, there's a bunch of it out here, but it's the cement residue that's there, which is all this stuff that you can see around right here. When runoff goes across that, the pH is going to go from about 8 to about 11 instantly. And then when that discharges into the receiving water, it does kill aquatic life. And obviously we don't have a lot of fish in our receiving waters, but it can kill plants and the macroinvertebrates and all that. And most importantly, it's in violation of your MS4 permit. So just make sure that the cement residues are cleaned up and that the, you know, these types of areas around these things are clear. So who's good signing off on this? This is evidence of pollution, right? I mean, there's clear evidence. So absolutely make them clean it up, pull the grate, make sure that there's nothing that made it into the storm drain system. If there is, clean it up. But, you know, hopefully something like this is worthy of a stop work on your job site, because you don't need the video of when it was occurring to know that something bad happened here and that the painter decided to clean out into the storm drain system. This is actually in Minnesota, by the way, so not a California problem. Okay, how about here? Issues. Yeah, there's no slope protection out there, erosion sediment control. I mean, they rebuilt the creek, and so that's obviously going to have to be revegetated or something, but you know, you need to have straw wattles. You can see rilling coming into right here. Since this is the new receiving water, you need to have, you know, perimeter control around that from the big, you know, opened up slopes. So just basic stuff. It has to have erosion control and it has to have sediment controls. I see neither on this slide. How about here? The obvious is that, you know, there's no erosion or sediment controls. Maybe it's been track walked. Obviously the slope drain needs a little attention, correct? And this, you know, this is something I would go over and check out. They put filter fabric around a drain inlet there, and it's not going to work. You know, nothing gets filtered on a construction site. It's going to, the fabric will clog, the water's going to pond up and probably collapse, you know, the wood stakes in, and it'll just become, you know, at worst a non-functional clogged inlet. So our tool is gravel bags, right? That's the tool. So until we have a better tool, let's deploy the tool and have them fix the slope drain while they're at it, and fix the rilling that's going on up here, and put some erosion control there. Everybody good with this? Track out, obviously, there's no construction entrance here, and I'm not really seeing too much perimeter in the way of perimeter controls either. Two basic basic things that have to be at every site. So, you know, hopefully in your book, this warrants a stop work at the site, because it's just basic stuff, and there's obviously a violation going on in the street. And the single orange cone just doesn't cut it for a BMP. How about here? I mean, this is why every inlet within the construction zone, even within the laydown area in the courtyard and stuff, needs to be covered. So, you know, have them clean this up, yank the grate, clean the sediment out of the drain box, and hopefully that would be done within 24 hours, something like that. What do you guys think about this one? It's got several issues, but they're kind of subtle. Anybody? Yeah, the silt fence is, yeah, my biggest problem with this is the check dams weren't built right. You can see the second one up is getting flanked, right? It needs to be extended, because what happens is the water comes up behind a check dam, it's gonna pond, and the water level's gonna rise. And if they just have a little bit of rock piled in, what they see is then the bottom of the stream, it's gonna flow around it, and it's just gonna start eroding, right? Your check dam is gonna become a problem instead of a solution. So those have to be designed correctly, meaning, or installed correctly, meaning they have to go far enough up the slope so that when the water ponds behind them, the water's not running around the sides. The silt fence is a bad idea. It's a perimeter control on a contour for shallow, unconcentrated flow. You see it all the time, abused, putting the silt fence in concentrated flow area. Not happening on your job site. Just have them take it out. Rock is what needs to go in here. There's two more things that I see on this. Number one is the straw. They blew straw down. I'm not sure that it's crimped, but we can't tell from the picture, but I am sure that it's not at a rate that's good. Look at, there's bare areas there. I'm not supposed to see bare areas, because if there's bare areas, it's going to be creating turbidity and running underneath the straw blanket. So they definitely cheaped out on the straw application. Minimum is about 2,000 pounds per acre, but you know how you can measure that by looking, you can't. So no bare areas is really what you want to do. And then the last thing is real subtle, but you can see that there's some erosion going on in here, and that's an indication that the check dams are spaced too far apart. You want to get no erosion between the check dams, so I would not only 86 the silt fence, fix the rock check dams that are there, which means adding more rock up higher up the sides of the swale so that it doesn't flank, and probably end up putting another one between each one that's there already. Here, what do you think? We got an erosion problem, right? They stuck the pipe into, I think what's going on here, you can see this is a roadway up here. They just put some gravel bags on the pipe. It's just like a 4-inch pipe. It's really hard to get much water, as you know, stormwater situation into a 4-inch pipe. You have to have a lot of head, a lot of ponding. So I think the water's just flowing over the curb and then cut a gully down this slope. And it's just essentially bypassing the pipe, so you get this little sediment delta here. And if you get that much material built up, there was a lot of turbidity that went into the storm drain system. So on something like this, it's just absolutely not working, and it needs to be corrected. You don't have to tell them how to correct it, but the pipe's too small, the inlet configuration isn't working. The net result is you got a gully in a 2-to-1 slope that needs to be repaired, and you can't go on that way. So this is the softball for you guys, right? Wrong application of silt fence. Obviously, there's not any other kind of erosion controls on this area